Hello and welcome to Bristol Reptile Emporium's YouTube channel. I'm Gail.
And I'm Michelle.
And today we are going to talk about fruit chaffers. Now I have some here in the tub which are in their adult form, and you have a few smaller ones there in their different life stages. So let's start off by how long do these guys live?
So they don't have a really long lifespan. I mean, you'll be lucky if you get over a year out of an adult in that point of its lifespan. Obviously, going through the life cycle does take a little bit longer. But yeah, so in that sort of region.
Okay, can you talk us through the life cycle?
Yeah, so your adult beetle will lay eggs. The eggs will hatch into the larvae, which are these guys here. Now, I've got some larvae of different sizes, and we'll do some stills of these so that you can see them a bit better. But that's a juvenile larvae, ironically. And then this is a larvae that's, because of the colour change, it's fairly close to pupating. Now, I am a bit careful when I handle these because a larvae of this size has got quite big jaws on it, and it is quite capable of giving you a little nip.
Ouch.
As it did before we started.
Yes, it is.
And then what happens is once they get to this sort of size, the larvae, they form a cocoon type item, which they actually manufacture out of the substrate within the enclosure, so it's quite important. So there is actually a larvae inside here, and it's basically it's metamorphosizing into the adult beetle.
To the adult beetles, and we have a few here. I'll try and pick one up. We will do sort of like some close-ups which you'll be able to see, but there we go. They don't get very big, so this would be fully grown now?
Yep, that's it. So once they pupate, that's the size they sort of come out, and that's what they stay. They don't get very big at all, so they're quite a compact little beetle. As you can see, they can fly, so you do need to allow for that, and they can catch you off guard when they do fly.
Yes, which is very entertaining when we do the children's talks and they fly off around the room.
Particularly helpful.
Yeah. Okay, so moving on, what would we feed these guys?
So they actually eat different types of food in the different life stages. So the adults, obviously, as their name indicates, like fruit. So it's fresh fruit that we're providing as the bulk of their diet. And then as the grub form, this is mostly leaf litter and matter that you would find like within plant matter, if that makes sense. So how we tend to do it here is we provide lots of leaf litter, some suitable wood type bark materials that you would find forest floor type styly things, so a few branches and stuff like that. And then that's why they've got these big powerful mouths which give you that nice little nip when you're not paying attention, and that is to break down all that matter that they're coming in contact with, and they're processing it through. And a lot of people look at it and go, well, they're just full of soil, but you can see the discoloration at the lower part of the grub. That's all the nutrients that they're processing, getting ready. It just bit me. Out. Getting ready to be excreted, and that's obviously how it's obtaining its nutrients. But they'll use that obviously to produce the little cocoon that they go through and grow into the beetle.
Oh, great. So what type of housing would we keep them in?
They're super easy to house because they're a compact size. So unless you've got millions of fruit chaffers, you can quite comfortably house them in either plastic, acrylic. Small glass enclosures are the easiest types. Obviously, we do introduce a small amount of humidity into the substrate because obviously we don't want them to dry out, especially the grubs. If they get dehydrated, obviously they're really going to struggle. So that's why we use those types of enclosures, because they do better than wooden ones. But yeah, they're not, I mean, we wouldn't use particularly large enclosures for them at all. So it might be something in the region of like 30 centimetres square, depending on the number of animals that you've got in there, or it might be something that's a little bit longer, and you know, it just fits within the space that people have got. So flat phanariums are quite popular, so those guys can be about 30 centimetres by 6 by about 15 centimetres, not 30 centimetres by 6, that'd be silly. But yeah, it's those types of enclosures which are a lot smaller, and that's what makes them good. Obviously the grubs aren't so great for kids because they're a bit of a free spirit and you have to watch them with your fingers, but the beetles are fantastic, and if you do have an enclosure with a bit of height, you get the opportunity to see them buzzing around and using the space quite nicely. So they're great.
I suppose the good thing is it's not just having one, you could have a few in an enclosure.
So us as people, we love to socially house animals, and we're aware that not all species are suitable to do that with. But obviously with stuff like this, we can socially house them, and it's not a problem as long as we provide the requirements for the quantity that we've got in that space.
Okay, great. So we spoke about what type of enclosure, and you spoke about sort of misting them to provide a little bit of water. Do they drink water?
So because they're an invertebrate, and like we've talked about before with invertebrates, we have to go careful because of how they obtain oxygen through their system. In our other videos we've talked about this. We don't want to provide a water bowl because there is a chance that they could fall in, not get out and drown basically. What we normally do is, like you say, misting, and for the actual beetles themselves, most of the hydration comes from the fruit that they're eating.
Yeah, that would make sense. Do we provide any other heating or lighting?
So these guys aren't native to the UK, so we do need to provide some. It's really going to vary depending on home temperatures. So obviously if you've got a hot house, you might not need to provide the same level of additional heat as if you've got an older, cooler house that struggles to maintain its temperatures. But we will need to provide something. So whether that's a small heat mat or something larger just to support that background temperature, lots of different equipment, lots of different ways of providing it depending on the enclosure type. So it's just going to be looking at those enclosure types. Oh, he's buzzing around.
Yeah, he's quite flying.
And also looking at the background temperature of the room the animal's being housed in.
Okay, and what about lights? Do they need?
So again, it's not essential to their well-being. Some owners, if they've got a nice bioactive visual display with them in and they really want to see them moving around, they may have an additional light in there for that purpose, but it's not essential to the well-being of the animal.
Okay. So we spoke about the lighting, the heating, what type of enclosure to house them in. What would we actually have within the enclosure?
So for them themselves, they're not super fussed about their decor. What they need is they need that substrate. If they've got height in the enclosure, they'll use it and have a little buzz around, which is quite nice to see. It scares the living daylights out of some people who are not expecting their beetle to fly. But obviously, it's more for our personal requirements as to what we want the enclosure to look like. So I've seen them kept in flat phanariums with lots of substrate, which isn't great for observation, but it provides them with everything that they need. And also in turn I've seen them kept in great big glass enclosures with loads of decor, live planting, and they've absolutely thrived in those environments as well.
Okay, so it's all down to the individual really.
Yeah,
absolutely. And what about any extra nutrients for them, or do they get it all from the fruits they eat?
So yeah, variety of diet is the key point here. So you are what you eat. So the more variety you've got, the better. So that's a really key point as we look at with any of the animals that we're talking about. Obviously for the grubs, it's all coming from that variety of leaf litter and all that nutrients you're putting into the substrate for them. And even the leftover fruit will be part of that if you're keeping the adults and the grubs in the same enclosure as they're cycling through their life stages. But there isn't anything, we don't have to go overboard. We can introduce a little bit of supplement to them. There's not much evidence to say, they don't have to have it, but there's not much evidence to say they definitely need it. So it's about diversity, if I can get the word.
Okay, so bioactive setups are very popular at the moment. You've seen a lot of people doing it and trying different things. Would the beetle be something that we could keep within the bioactive setup with another animal?
You'd have to be super careful as to what your species is that is your main core species in the enclosure. There are some people who have got the space to denote bioactive purely to this species, which is fab. If you can do that, great, do it, and they will absolutely thrive. They're a great little beetle, they really are. However, we are aware that some people like to introduce range of species into, into what they've got as like their bulk, if that makes sense. So for example, I definitely wouldn't put them in with something like a boss monitor. And the reason being is this, basically bearded dragon, adult bearded dragon or bigger, and these are dinner.
Yes. Definitely don't want that.
Yeah. So if you want these inverts as part of a diverse diet for your animal, great, but you won't be able to have them loose in the substrate because your box monitor is just going to come along and trough the lot. Even a beardie, if he sees something like that, he's going to be like, "Whoa, happy days, food time." So we'd have to introduce them when we required them, but in turn we'd have to go careful with other species so that they're not harassing each other and obviously affecting the care of your core species. So obviously that's when it becomes tricky, and it becomes a case of, am I providing the care that I need for all the animals? So not just the beetles, but also what I'm thinking of keeping them with. So I would say that in some cases it might be suitable. For example, if I've got a mixed invert enclosure, so if I had some millipedes, I might introduce some of these guys in with them. But I probably wouldn't do it with another reptile. So I've known some people do it with things like chameleons. But if the chameleon's digging, if it's a female, she's going to lay some eggs. These guys find the eggs, they're gone.
Yeah.
If you don't get to them first. And that's where we've got to be careful when we're introducing things for bioactive. Sometimes it can be helpful, but sometimes it can be a hindrance too.
Okay. So we spoke a little bit about the beetle and its life cycle and what care it has. It doesn't live very long, so about a year, would you say?
As an adult stage.
As an adult stage, about a year. So these are a great pet for your children, sort of like, and as an introduction to the reptile world or to the insect world. And they just make very sort of entertaining pets. It's nice to be able to watch them in their natural habitat, isn't it?
They're a fantastic little beetle. And if you just fancy something that's not going to take up a massive amount of space, you want something different that you can have a go at taking through the life cycle, they're brilliant.
Thank you for watching Bristol Reptile Emporium's YouTube channel.
Don't forget to subscribe, and we look forward to seeing you next week for another video. Bye!
Bye!